Hi there, good evening everyone. Hello, can everybody hear me okay? Fantastic. Well, my name is Jeremy Johnson. I'm the president and CEO of the Historical Society of Palm Beach County, and it is my pleasure to both thank you all for attending tonight's lecture, but also to welcome you to the county's historic 1916 courthouse. Tonight's presentation is very special, not only to us, but the entire county, because this will kick off sort of a month-long celebration of the 100th birthday of the building that our museum calls home. So we're delighted tonight to have our lecturers, and before I introduce them, I just want to do a couple of housekeeping items, if I may. First thing I'd like to do is to acknowledge and thank and recognize our volunteers. I know I look out over the audience and I see many of our volunteers, from our board members to our archival volunteers to our docents. If I could just ask all of our volunteers to please stand and be recognized. We cannot accomplish the things that we do given our limitations financially. We would not be able to do half of the programming that we do without our dedicated volunteers. So I just always like to acknowledge them and to thank them. But I also want to welcome all of you. If anyone's interested in getting involved with our volunteer program, I would encourage you to see Rhonda Gordon. Rhonda's going to be around later on this evening. But we love our volunteers. We have the most amazing volunteers in all the world. So thank you all. I also want to mention to you, I know that many of you all are members in the organization, and I want to thank you for your membership. But I also want to point out that we are a membership-driven organization, and so individual and corporate memberships are very meaningful to us. So for those of you all that are members, I want to thank you for your membership and your support. And for those of you that may not be members, I would encourage you to consider membership, because it really is the lifeblood of what makes this institution a reality for our community. I also want to take an opportunity to acknowledge and thank some of our corporate sponsors and partners. And in particular, I'd like to introduce and thank and acknowledge Michelle Vogel from Wilmington Trust. Wilmington Trust has come on this year as one of our corporate sponsors. They're an amazing organization. And I just want to invite Michelle Vogel to come up for just a minute to say a couple of words about Wilmington Trust, our sponsor for tonight's lecture. Michelle? And I guess Matt King is going to join her as well, her partner in crime.
Jeremy, just really quickly, thank you all. We're delighted, Matt and I are delighted to be representing Wilmington Trust here. We're both history nuts, so it's been fun getting to know more and more about the community and how important, of course, this organization is to the community. As Shakespeare said, past is prologue, and I think we're finding out that more and more every day. So thank you all, and we appreciate your patronage, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle and Matt, and thanks to Wilmington Trust, again, our corporate sponsor for this evening. Okay, before I introduce our speakers for tonight, I just want to take an opportunity to share with you a couple of our upcoming events. The first of which is taking place next Thursday. We have created a new program. We launched it last year. It's called Third Thursdays at 3, and it's really designed for people that may not have the constraints of a 9-to-5 kind of job. We wanted to create an opportunity that would give people that weren't constrained by the 9-to-5 an opportunity to come down to the museum, have a tour, and enjoy a special talk at 3 o'clock on the third Thursdays. I'm delighted to announce, as you all may have read in the shiny sheet, this coming next Thursday, the 20th, we have Sandra Thompson, a local author and artist, who will be talking about Palm Beach from the 1920s to the 1940s, essentially just after the Gilded Age, if you will, or the Old Guard era. So I hope you'll come out and join us next Thursday at 3 p.m. And we have a special opportunity that we have partnered with some local restaurants on Clematis Street, where we wanted to give our patrons out of our 3 o'clock lecture, it'll be out probably about 4:30, the opportunity to go down to Clematis Street and enjoy some half-price meals at some of our local restaurants. We've got a great partnership, and for anyone that's interested in learning more about that, please check our website or feel free to speak with Rhonda Gordon, our volunteer and outreach coordinator. She'll be happy to share more information about that. We also want to announce our annual meeting and election of officers is going to be on Tuesday, April 25th, at which point we are going to throw this building the party that it never had when it opened. Does anyone know why there wasn't a lot of pomp and circumstance when this building opened in April of 1917? Any history buffs in the audience? There we go. I see Debbie in the back. There was lots, there were parades, there were celebrations, there were picnics, there were a lot of things planned because at the time, this would have been, as it really is now, a crown jewel of our county. And as we all know, unfortunately, the United States entered World War I on April 6th of 1917, and therefore all celebrations really on a national level were canceled, and it was a very somber time. So we now have the opportunity on Tuesday the 25th to throw this building the party that it never had. So I hope you'll all come back on the 25th and join us from 5:30 to 7:30 for the birthday party this building never had. And then finally, our last event I want to tell you about, for those of you all that have children or grandchildren or just enjoy to support our armed forces as well, on Saturday, I believe it's May 20th, we will be celebrating Armed Forces Day here at the museum. And if you have not been to our Armed Forces Day celebration, we load up our front yard and our backyard with reenactors and armaments and vehicles and all kinds of things, both from the Civil War era all the way up through Vietnam. And it's a great opportunity to come out and acknowledge our veterans and acknowledge the people that serve in our armed forces. So I hope you'll mark your calendar for Saturday, May 20th for Armed Forces Day. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our two esteemed speakers tonight. I have done something with this microphone, so forgive me. First, I'd like to introduce Robin Lunsford. Robin Lunsford is a senior project manager for Hedrick Brothers Construction. Robin has been building high-profile projects with Hedrick Brothers Construction since 1995. With more than 30 years of construction experience, he has advanced his career from carpenter to senior project manager. Robin has vast experience in building and renovating historic, commercial, luxury residential, and high-end retail projects. He received the 2007 American Institute of Architects Palm Beach Chapter's Craftsman of the Year Award for his work on the restoration of the historic 1916 Palm Beach County Courthouse. He is also a board member of the Florida Trust for Historic Preservation. Robin Lunsford. All right. It's also now my pleasure to introduce our other speaker for this evening, Rick Gonzalez. Rick Gonzalez is president of REG Architects. He opened his practice in downtown West Palm Beach with his father, Ricardo, in 1988, and he's been in the downtown area ever since. Now, I'm going to actually have to abbreviate Rick's bio, because if I were to read all of his accolades, all of his awards, and all of his appointments, we would never get to our lecture tonight. So forgive me for doing this, Rick. But Rick received 2 architectural degrees from the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C., with additional university coursework at Miami-Dade College, Francisco Moroccan University in Guatemala City, Autonomous University of Central America in San Jose, Costa Rica, and continuing education coursework under Andres Duani at Harvard Graduate School of Design, and Manuel Ponce's Venice, Florence, and Vigneto Classic Design in Italy. His historic projects include Mar-a-Lago Club of Palm Beach, the Historic Children's Museum and High School in Boynton Beach, the Harriet Himmel Theater in West Palm Beach, the historic Ruth Jones Cottage in Boynton Beach, the Cultural Council's building in Lake Worth, Florida on Lucerne Avenue, and of course our very own 1916 historic Palm Beach County Courthouse in West Palm Beach, the historic Sunset Lounge and Club in West Palm Beach, and the Lincoln Theater in Stuart, Florida. Please join me in welcoming Robin and Rick, our lecturers for tonight.
Yeah, I'm a lefty, so you're going all right.
Yeah, okay.
We'll switch sides. I'm a left-handed person. Okay. And do we have someone run? Oh, do we run this? Yes, we run this, right? Okay.
Testing.
There you go. All right, Robin. We haven't practiced much, but we will entertain you. And we will show you some amazing photos of this labor of love that Robin and I and Dale Hedrick's over there in the back too, and his company, and all of that applause. You know, those were all people from Hedrick Brothers, but
So Rick, before we get started,
yes.
if I could have Dale, Sandy, and Dave Smith stand up, just so everyone knows, these are
The
members of the team that actually worked here on the courthouse project that made the project so successful. Thank you.
That's right. Thank you. And thank you, Hedrick Brothers. Architects love when contractors make them look good, and Dale and I have done many projects, and I love working with you. Thank you very much. All right, so we'll get started. Okay, we'll get started. It's going to be very interactive. If you have any questions, if there's a picture of a photo of a detail that you just think is amazing, bring it up. We haven't done this before. It's our first time. We're celebrating 100 years of this wonderful building, and we feel very, very proud to have been part of this labor of love almost 10 years ago. So we'll go ahead and get started. So, the title?
Yep.
And you know who we are already. And you want to say a couple things?
Well, a lot of people ask me what's the most exciting thing about this project, and I was born and raised here in Palm Beach County, and South Florida doesn't seem to have the deep history of older buildings with brick and stone, and this being one of those buildings is very special, and having the opportunity to do that is just amazing. And so very proud to be a part of the team in Palm Beach County to do the job.
We love this picture too. This is, if you've come to my walking tours, I do a first Friday of the month walking tours. And this year, my friends at the City of West Palm Beach said, let's do a green market tour on a Saturday morning. Well, we've had 2 of those, and over 50 people came to each one of those, and we're going to do them in the fall. But this is one of the pictures we love to use as part of our storytelling downstairs, because it's when the building got built. And I love this picture because it shows this courthouse in 1916 in this environment. And what I love about that picture are 2 very important things. Not only the historic, classical, neoclassical civic structure that you see there, but look at the driveway, look at the road. It's just a very plain road. It's just a shell rock with a little bit of asphalt on it. And it's the way things should be, which means money should be spent on historic buildings, on our civic buildings. Our roadways should be secondary to our buildings. Today, we don't do it that way. We need to go back to that. So I love using this picture for that part of the story. Again, it was a neoclassical. The father and son team from Jacksonville, Talley, were the architects. Do you remember the contractor? I don't remember, but we had a... Thank you. And they helped us. Of course, they built it in neoclassical structures. The Como building downtown is a neoclassical structure. The Harvey building downtown is a neoclassical structure. These are buildings that are organized horizontally and vertically. They'll have a pediment portico in the middle, and then they'll have bookends, like our beautiful courthouse, and then they're horizontally designed or organized with limestone, and then they'll have brick, and then they'll use other materials to identify it that way. Some of the history of the building. Another great story. When we stand in the plaza right outside the building, we have the new courthouse from the 80s across the street, and we have this wonderful courthouse here. Imagine that class for 4th graders or for anyone. I mean, we start the lecture of the walking tours, we tell people we had about 1,000, maybe a couple thousand people here 120 years ago. We have over 6 million people in a 100-mile-long city, from Jupiter to Homestead, 10 miles wide, it's 100 miles long. So much change. I don't know anywhere else in our country where we've had that kind of a change. So when you stand across the street and you see that's one courthouse of 4, we now have county offices right up behind us all over the county, millions of square feet. Everything was in this building. We had the courtroom, we had the sheriff was in this building, we had all sorts of people working in this building. Robin, share some of the stories about the 1/4-inch steel plating that we found downstairs.
So with them being government, the legal documents that are held in a courthouse, one of the large rooms down on the main elevation was lined with the floors, the ceilings, and the walls with 1/4-inch steel plate. Some of that original steel plating was still in the building when we came in to do the renovation. So some of those findings that were very exciting, we found some buried in the floor. And then the photograph, for the fire rating to protect the documents. And then the photograph that you see is the 1928 hurricane when it came through, what it left behind with the courthouse in the background.
The project also, when you look at the photos downstairs and when we do the walking tours, we have these beautiful pictures of 1916, and then we have 1927. The county was growing so fast that the county went to the original architect and said, can you guys build us another one of these? And they said yes. So if you consider this building, the way I like to share the story is this is an I, north-south. The 27 building was a T, would have been right behind us between this building and the next building, and both of them together formed an H. So that was the second period design in the 1920s, 1927. What's important about that period, too, is this beautiful courtroom that you see here was modified from this doorway this way with a hallway. So this courtroom was seen like this, beautifully restored for the first time in 2008, and it had not been visible since the 1920s. We had people like Karen Marcus, who used to work here as a young lady, other people, Joel Daves and other people that worked here, and they remembered this building before the wrapping of the building in the 60s. But of course, nobody was alive that remembered this courtroom the way it looks today for the first time. In the 50s, you'll see on the side there's a little bit of an addition. They also did that in the same style of architecture, so they plugged the H and they made a square. And I like to say that that was the jelly of the donut, you know, that we ended up with this really ugly donut and that we had a really nice jelly in the middle of the building. Here are some pictures right from that period. We were fortunate when we were doing the research for the competition for the project to find these wonderful Polaroid pictures. The archives, I'll plug for the Historical Society. Every time, I've been working in downtown for 30 years, every time I work on a historic building in Palm Beach or West Palm Beach, first place I stop is the archives of the society because they have excellent photography, articles, and so forth, a lot of information to do research. We were fortunate that we found these pictures from this one's from the 50s down here, and that was obviously from the 20s, and then the drawings too. Remember, Robin, we had drawings from the 1927 edition, not from the original 1916. And you might say, well, why is that a problem? Well, architects like to tinker, right, Robin? Yeah. And so the detailing in the 1916 original building was different from the 1927 building. And Robin's going to show you a picture in a moment or two that shows the little bit of help that we got in the demolition phase to help us correct that difference. Again, the wraparound was done in 1970. You can see now how the building just kind of grew into a big blob. And that's what it looked like. If you're new to Palm Beach County, that's what it looked like, right? Part of the walking tour, I like to pretend that we're doing a quiz and there's questions, and I ask people, where's the front door in that building? And nobody knew where the front door of that building was. Where's the front door of this classical, beautiful building that we have, right? It's right over there, thank you, on the west side of the street. There were efforts, there were many efforts within the judicial division here, attorneys. I remember there was a law firm, I had heard a law firm that had proposed a complete reconstruction of this building at one point. I think it was Searcy Denny that had proposed, and they were shifting it to the north. There were other efforts to save it, to try to rebuild it, but none of them really took off to raise a lot of money, $30 million at the time. And then we ended up with the feasibility study.
So around 2003, Palm Beach County wanted to know whether the building inside, the 1916 building, was salvageable. No one knew what was exactly left inside the building after they had done the wraparound. So they sent out requests for qualifications for qualified folks who could go in and determine that. They hired REG and Hedrick Brothers, and they funded a $50,000 feasibility study for us to go into the building, dissect some of the additions, and see exactly what was left without the cost of unwrapping it. So Rick's office and our office got together. We looked at a bunch of different type of photographs and selected certain areas throughout the building that we could go into the building, go to the exterior wall, say at this corner right here, tear open some drywall and see what was there. And our study was based on doing like 60 of those little inspection holes all the way around the building, and that gave us enough information to paint the bigger picture of, once it's unwrapped, what is left and what's the value there to move forward. And so the feasibility study, we put all the information, and it allowed them to proceed with a master plan for the demolition, unwrap, and restoration.
I'd like to share with young people today that if you want to have a lot of fun in a career, become a preservation architect or a preservation contractor, because you get to be almost like a detective. You get to do a lot of research. And this was probably the top. We did the Harriet together, and that was a lot of research too. What was original, what was the back edition. But this one was great. This one was like, I thought we were in King Tut's tomb, and we were like digging around. I'd say, Robin, can we open up a hole? You can't see it from here, but I'm looking at one of the first details, which is the pilaster column on the back. And I'll never forget the day that Robin and the crew from Hedrick Brothers tore down the drop ceiling. Imagine this space. There was another floor, and there was a wall in the middle. This was actually 4 courtrooms in here. All right, so it was a jigsaw puzzle, right? Walking through the building, it was dark. We were wearing our masks. We had a very short time period to prepare the report, and we just got really excited because we found all these little pieces inside and the outside of the building too. You could actually see where the addition from the 70s met the building from the 1920s and from 1916. It was very exciting times.
So think about the most challenging puzzle or task you've ever had to do, and do it without original drawings, and then the fact that Palm Beach County would kick your butt when you screwed it up. So that's
Pretty much right.
That's what we were going. That's what we were going through. The excitement started from day one when the job was awarded, all the way to the end.
And you know, we've done a lot of county work over the years. We do a lot of public work, but public work today is very different from what it used to be. Public work today is vinyl flooring or carpet, vinyl wallboards, drywall, and drop ceilings. This was like a foreign animal to them. This was like, what are you guys doing? What's a historic building, right? And so Robin and I and the Hedrick people and the REG people would say, just leave us alone. We're going to get to the bottom of this. And we were lucky. We had Karen Marcus, we had Warren Newell, we had other county commissioners and other people from the community at large that said, let's just get to the bottom of it before you demolish the building. These are some pictures again of Robin and actually of the work crews. You see the mask wearing and the rust. Okay, we would find original doors too, right, Robin?
Yep.
And windows and hardware.
So the part of the puzzle is, you imagine you had the 1916 courthouse and all its original doors and hardware, and then in 27 they built the matching building behind it with different doors, different hardware. And so the challenge for us, as the county grew, these doors moved around the buildings. They moved out in the wraparound buildings. Judges like to take their door with them and put it wherever their new chamber was. So when the building was abandoned, we had to dress up with the suits, and the salvage efforts were just part of that giant puzzle. We peel layers of paint off a door to see how it was made, to know what year that door belonged to. Same thing with the hardware and so forth. So these are some areas, and that's an original window that was, we peeled layers of the lead and everything off that was preserved, original doors on the left, and then original hardware.
You know, another detail, because what period do you go back to? In historic preservation, you always try to find the period of significance, the historic period of significance. I remember one time we were walking around and we saw the kind of Art Deco-ish from the 1950s. It was kind of like a modern railings from the, it wasn't this beauty. It was all railings. Remember that, Robin? I was like, oh, that looks great. And no, Rick, we can't save that. You know, we're working on the older period and not the 1950s period. This is the piece that I was mentioning. Robin, why don't you talk about this? This is an incredibly important piece to the exterior restoration of the project.
Well, you go ahead.
All right, so everybody see that piece over there, right? What does that show? You know, classical architecture is based on certain mathematical rhythms and proportions. And so if you have a 1927 building with a proportion B, and you had the 1916 with a proportion and rhythm A, there's no way to know what the A looked like if you had no drawings for it, and all you had was the B drawings to work with. We found at the end of the demolition on the southeast corner, still remember, Robin gave me a call at the office. I sent Vincent and somebody else from the office to field measure one section of the A building.
It's one of
embedded.
it's one of those calls where you find it, and you know he's struggling to figure it out because we don't have the original drawings, and you just make that, Rick, you got to come see this, because it gave the signature of the large cornice that runs all the way around the building.
And we would be here every day. I mean, our offices are 2 blocks away. It was just one of those, Renee, one of those extra jobs where you just forget the hours, forget the budget, just come and do the work because, Robin would discover something like that. But that one piece there helped helped Archie and Vincent in the office and my dad and Colin finish the drawings. 1,000 shop drawings were prepared for the stones in this building off of the start of that one pattern that we were able to figure out. So imagine if we would have then been construing or reconstructing or reimagining it, which would have been okay, but would not have been the real way of doing the project. Here's another view of it too on the other side. Here's a window. And another thing, I love this picture because you see the steel over here? That's the building from the late 60s that they built over here on this site. The drawings said that they were going to, because the span went from the sidewalks to the building. That's quite a long span. And the drawings called for embedding the beams into the walls of this building. In other words, if they would have built it the way they drew it, they would have obliterated the facades of this building. Another discovery from Hedrick Brothers was that they didn't build it that way. Somebody decided to put a column before they hit the brick. There it is. And they put expansion joints between the steel and the brick. We were amazed when we did the demolition, that the brick and the windows were there, and that somebody in the construction department did not follow the architect's plans.
So, yeah.
And I'll admit here today that I'm very happy they did that. Right?
Yep, that one's going to hurt.
What's that, Dale? I know, not you. Oh my God, you got to share this story. Although this is an important part of my walking tour, I love hearing it from your point of view because he actually corrected me. For 17 years, I've been thinking that these pieces of the columns were, someone told me, at the airport, west of the airport in a lot. Tell them the truth, Robin, because I admit I made a mistake.
With the whole story of possibly restoring this building, Dale and his involvement in the community, and Ben Clemens, which was a huge part of the project, all this communication is happening through many, many years that the columns are stored at a cemetery. And so they told us the cemetery, where it is, in the lower left is Hillcrest off of Parker, north of Forest Hill. And the mausoleums, those columns still exist there. And then the rest of the columns were down at the cemetery off Hypoluxo and I-95, part of the Hillcrest property as well. And so imagine, you're involved in restoring this building. You've never seen the columns before, and you get an address to go look for them. I drove around the corner of the building, and that's where they lay, at that building. So they thought to save the portico columns just in case one day they would restore the building. And
Isn't that's just an amazing feat. I remember going to the counties, again, to the county facilities people and saying, can we go get that column out of the building in downtown Delray? There's a courthouse down there, and they have one column. Open a hole in the roof. We really need one of the columns, right? And they said no, right? And then we went to the cemetery. Can we have those 6 columns back from your entryway? And they said no. We've owned them for 35 years. Yeah. But there's a place where you might find some of these. And then Robin calls us 11 3/4 columns, and we needed 12, right? I mean, isn't that a great story? So part of the quiz is you need to figure out which piece is the new piece, and I'm not going to tell you. That you'll have to come back and tell me later. So the pieces, the pedestal, the 3 sections of the column, and the capital. And that's a very important detail in classical design. We're very fortunate today. We're getting, there's the capital, right? And there's the pedestal. That they did match. For some reason, they use the same, and these are solid. These are completely different how things are built today. If you go, we're very fortunate that 4th District Court of Appeals is moving downtown. They're moving downtown. They're being built on Tamarind. You might have seen under construction. We're very unfortunate that the architecture doesn't do justice to the importance of that building. Today it's going up steel columns with fake columns, and they're lollipop columns. They're not entices. They don't have any curvature. They don't have a capital. They don't have a base. So it's kind of like a cartoon of what should have been done. Even though it's great, I'm very happy that that's another use that we need downtown, but architecture is very important when you're doing neoclassical work, that you do it correctly, you know? And so our job as architect and preservation contractor is not to make it up or change it, but it is to put it back together the way it was. You know, we have a lot of arguments in design nowadays in architecture that preservationists will try to do in Palm Beach, for example, not to pick in Palm Beach, but they will mimic a 1920s building with a 2016 edition, the same as the original. And that's, to me, not the right way, because you don't know when the historic building was in the addition. In places like Toronto, you'll see a building that has a huge glass addition next to a historic building, and that's a complete departure. We like to do it the way we did it in this building and at the Harriet. At the Harriet, the addition changes the rhythms, the volumes, the scale, the paint, the awnings subtly, so you can see the difference between 2000 and 1924. And here on the east elevation, it's all brand new because it got completely destroyed. The brick is one color and the glass is brand new, but it ties into the historic design. Robin?
Okay. Well, go ahead.
Yes. Oh, the quarry.
So we located the original quarry that supplied the original stone to the courthouse in Indiana, Bedford, Indiana, and the limestone that matches is called Indiana Limestone Buff, Golden Buff. The strange story about it, after we allocated and bought the blocks to salvage this project, they had to close that quarry to that color of limestone because it's no longer available. So that's one of the interesting stories of the project. That's a block that I took up that was salvaged for the original match. So the Empire State Building,
Lincoln Memorial, Washington Monument, a lot of the Ottawa.
Several of the buildings built at that time.
Yeah. So again, this is really an act of God. This project is, in my opinion, because so many things happen, like getting $18 million. Imagine asking Judge $18 million today to do something like this. They'd kick us out of town, right? Yeah. And all of these pieces that come together in the story of this building. Okay, so after we finally do the report and we finally get the votes to move forward, and sometimes it would take just a little thing like the county offices buildings are behind us. Their conference room on the 12th floor is right on the western window. Mrs. Commissioner, would you come over here to the window? Robin, let me show you. You see that H downstairs? Remember the H? There's the H embedded inside the building. So we actually had one commissioner change their vote after they actually saw the footprint of the both buildings within the original building. The site plan, the master plan was done. We had, again, photos that showed the palm trees, minimum landscaping, like the 1920s, nothing embellished, nothing. George Sanchez was our landscape architect. We got letters, Congressman Mark Foley and Wexler and others who gave us support. We went and received not one, but 3 state grants. The chairwoman at the time, she now runs the University of West Florida, and she's an archaeologist. And I'll never forget her telling Harvey Oyer and Karen Marcus in Tallahassee as we were getting our grants, "You all are doing an archaeological dig in Palm Beach County." And I said to her, we looked at her like, what is she talking about? She goes, "Yeah, you're unwrapping a building. It's like doing archaeology, but it's vertical instead of underground." And so some people in West Florida think we did that. Robin?
So, we did the feasibility study, put the numbers together, showed them what it was going to look like, found the stone, located everything, and then the county was wise enough to issue a contract to salvage and unwrap the building. And so the next phase for us was to create a value, to go in, pick all these pieces out, salvage them, and then unwrap the building without damaging. So they approved that, and we moved forward with the project. So that photograph was after some things were removed. The floor was all covered up with tiles, so there's a story coming with the floor and what was salvaged, but the interiors didn't look like that when it was turned loose.
That was after a lot of the work had been done.
Yeah.
And the same thing on the exterior, as you can see some of the details of the unwrapping.
So you want to show them the roof line, the parapet?
Oh, yes. Oops. All right. I think this one's better over here. Yeah, I think it's a little bit better. You see?
Yeah.
Do you all see this right over here? Does everybody see that right there? That's the parapet. There's the front eye, and it's hard to see the T and the H, but they're right there. They're right behind there. So from up there, I forget the commissioner's name from Riviera Beach. Huh? Maddie? Yes.
Maddie Green, yes.
And she saw that and she said, "Oh my God, it's in there," you know. And so
Right.
we needed her vote. I think we got a 4-3 vote too.
So while you're on that photograph, Rick, he showed you the parapet wall, but you see the little gray line at the lower round? That's after we had gutted the interiors and created a buffer zone by coming back 8 feet off of the exterior building and removing that wraparound all the way to the floor.
Right there.
So you're gonna see photos of the interior. So the mosaic floor was not exposed to us, and we didn't know how much of it was intact. So as you walk around, believe it or not, about 93% of the mosaic floor was all intact. We didn't have to do anything. We salvaged some from the 27 because we couldn't match it, and did a little bit of patching with materials that are there. So that was a huge surprise. And then as we go through the story, the mosaic pattern and location told us where to put walls back on the interior that had been removed. And the two beautiful staircases that you possibly came up or you see at the end of, both of those were totally gone and filled in. That mosaic pattern down on the second main floor told us where to put that staircase exactly, to a fraction of where those marble staircases go back in. So that all some of the magic to the whole story.
This is also after it's been cleaned up quite a bit too.
So going in, you just can't turn people loose in an old building, although tear it apart and tear out all the good stuff, right? So we had to go in and identify original 1916 walls, 1916 doors. Everything else was to be removed. So we didn't want anything that was applied at any time after 1916 because we were restoring it back to 1916.
Demolition by words. I like that.
Yeah.
Too. Oops.
That's the salvage of the doors. Some of the original doors in their location with the trim.
Sorry about that.
A lot of the brick.
So they didn't give us $30 or $40 million to put both buildings back together.
Right.
So we said, all right, we'll just cannibalize the 27 building for parts. So you all had, trailers on site, and we put doors, we put brick, we put hardware, we did all sorts of things to keep it and to save it for later use. There's some of the brick that's being removed.
Brick and limestone.
More stone too.
And that's down in the base. That was down in the basement elevation, the lower elevation. Another interesting story. When we were getting ready to do the drawings, we don't have basements here in South Florida, and so it was a decision that we had to make wisely to say first floor, second floor, third floor, fourth floor in the drawings, or say basement, first floor, second floor, third floor. So because of the layout and what everybody's used to here, we did first floor, second floor, third floor, and then called the second the main floor.
I'm sure the building official and the fire official are not in the room today, so there were reasons we labeled the building that way.
Yeah.
Things compromise, right? And then wonderful, these windows, these beautiful pair of windows that you see over here, we didn't have any idea about these windows. Even on the drawings, we didn't have this. And then we found the windows. There they are. And so these beautiful, these are part of the windows, right? Go ahead.
Yep. So behind the windows, those are the ones that we had salvaged and taken out. Behind the windows, you see the columns and beams. Well, that's what most of this interior looked like. They had removed wall sections in between. So that's kind of the remnants of what it looked like after we had finished the careful removal of the interiors inside the building here.
The hardware, too, on the left is the hardware that you have. And take a close look. We don't have any hardware here to look at, but when you leave the building, we added a design to turn them from a knob to a lever. So we respected the original design, and the lever allowed us to do a handicap accessible door entry. So all the doors are handicap accessible. the addition of the elevators, the addition of the ground floor entry from the back of the building. Just like at the Harriet, we took a lot of care to make sure we had accessibility in the major historic structure.
So the knob on the left is original 1916. The knob on the right is the 1927. So
See what I told you about
you can see
tinkering with design, right? We change things,
Yeah, the architect's messing with stuff.
making it hard for you guys, the way we like it.
It wasn't nice enough to begin with, huh?
Never. Another cleaned up room.
Yeah. This
The
is
demolition,
during the gut out. This is in the wraparound now. You know, gutting out the wraparound.
Right. So these, anything that you see steel like this is from the 68 edition. There it is, keeping it nice and clean. There's the floor. We're actually in this room, right? I think, is this part of the,
Yep.
right?
Part of the wood floor.
Yep.
Yep.
There's that detail, that fantastic. You'll see it before you leave. Both of them are up there. Pretty
So
good
those
shape too, right? I mean, you know, a lot of it was in pretty good shape. And where we were missing pieces, one of the pleasures of working with Hedrick Brothers is that they do a lot of homes in Palm Beach, a lot of high-end buildings, and they use the top subcontractors and artisans and laborers and craftsmen. So imagine trying to do this project in Miami, for example, at the Courthouse in Miami. I wouldn't have had the same luck because, I'd call Dale and say, or Robin, we need someone to help us with the stone or the brick or the plaster work, and we had that kind of capability here in town to do it.
So this molding was hidden by a ceiling that was put in through all the years in renovations. As they added more utilities in the ceilings, air conditioning, fire lines, they just kept dropping ceilings, and we could see the lines snapped on the wall for all the different ceilings that they added over the years.
Hiding everything, all the good stuff.
Everything that you see with those, the plaster moldings on those beams, all of that was buried with acoustical or drywall ceilings.
Oops.
Now that, you want to go
And
back?
a little bit more of that. Now, this room, you ready for this room? After it got cleaned. That's what this room looked like.
So go
After it
back.
got cleaned.
So go back real quick.
Before one?
Just
Okay.
once, yep. All right, so if you look in the middle, see the shiny plaster ceiling molding that's right there?
Oh,
Okay.
yes, that's what this is.
That's one of these moldings here in the ceiling.
Wait, Robin, tell them what
So
this is
now
over here.
now you're looking at the floor. They added a concrete floor through this whole room and split it up. So one of our tasks was to remove the floor and bring this room back to its original. So that's the ceiling, the portions of the ceiling that were left.
Right here.
And then
The skylights.
taking out the floor, you go to the next page. It's after we opened it up.
And we do have to compromise. So one of the compromises were the skylights. They're not skylights anymore, but they still have the same molding, the same detailing, the same finish. They don't have natural light. They have, fluorescent lights and stuff.
And following the guidelines of historic restoration, the plastering company, you can see the different pieces. Over there to the right, there's a piece of ceiling and molding. Below that a little bit, Rick. Right there. That's a little section right there that was left original, and then there's a gap in missing. So
I think that's over here somewhere.
Most of the ceiling was missing, pieces were hanging. Well, the plastering company says, I'm just going to tear all that down and redo a new ceiling. Well, that's not the way historic restoration is done. And so he had to re-level those pieces out, frame in between them just the way it was originally, and then put it back the way it was. So beneath those layers of paint is original ceiling areas with new areas patched in.
And match it. These closures over here are these two openings over here for the windows.
Those two windows.
So that's like sitting there looking this way to the east.
And there was plywood in the middle. They had ran hallways right through the middle of this room over into the 27 building. That's where Rick was saying this room changed drastically in 1924.
Yeah, just 11 years after it opened, then no one saw this room till 2008. This is it being clean. Another thing we did is the wood floors. These beautiful wood floors. We took the good pieces. We made sure that, the judge, his chambers were with the good pieces, right? And then this is new. But if you open the doors and you walk around, you can't tell. You really can't tell between the new piece and the old piece.
So the smooth area floor under the wheelbarrow and to the left is original 1916 wood floor
And it's
that
over
was
here.
salvaged and put back.
This,
That was the buffer zone.
right.
You want
So
to describe it?
That was great because the natural light would come in, and now we could see the courthouse standing in the 1967 structure and looking at it, and that was just awesome.
And I would have to say, when we got it to this stage, from the street you couldn't tell what was hidden. The 1969-70 building still wrapping around. So this is the first time where we could take the county commissioners and all the people involved with the project up into the building, and for the first time they got to see what was there for the building. And I believe it was that day
That helped.
when the project was, yes, let's restore this building.
This is the backside. So the 27 was wrapped by this piece, and that's how close it was to the county building behind us over here. So, I mean, that whole character, you know, when you're preserving historic structures, it's not just a building, but it's very important to have a historic setting. And getting the setting right is critical. So many places, when you go to Philadelphia, you go to Washington, every other place, it's not just the building, but it's the green space, the four corners or the four squares of the building. We worked really hard to convince the county not to build anything else, but to have the four squares of the building, and we have that setting back in place today. There's some demolition work.
If you look through the columns, you can see the brick building through there, just under there, yeah.
Mm-hmm. These are great shots. I remember the first day the demolition work started, and my son's in the picture at the end. He was 8 years old at the time. We just came downtown, lived in Juneau at the time, sat at the county courthouse steps and just watched demolition for 4 hours on a Saturday.
Yeah.
Even architects like demolition, Dale. There's some great Now, you see the building, right? Boy, she looks pretty beat up. Is that a historic building or not? Our report, we got very fortunate that we found more on the inside than we expected and a lot less on the outside than we expected. The standard is 50% rule, that you have to have at least 50% of the building's essence there. And so, of course, some of the county commissioners looked at that and said, there ain't 50% of that building there. At the time, the Florida Historical Commission and the Division of Historical Resources had architects on call. We had money back then in Florida. Florida's always been a leader, by the way, in giving out historic preservation grants, especially back then. We called David Farrell. He's retired now. David, can you come down and visit? Because they're not believing us. He came. He flew down from Tallahassee, walked the building, had lunch with Robin and I. The next day, he had sent a letter to the commissioner saying there is more than 50%. We certify there's more than 50% of the building remaining. Very important decision to make sure we could keep going on the project. There's the demolition work. This is that backside or the east side of the building completely obliterated because when they added the T, that was just a minor work over here. But when they plugged it with the 55 edition, they plugged it well. They just ripped off all the brick and all the windows on that easterly side. And this was all cleaned up. Carrie O'Donnell, the PR, did a wonderful job with Dreyfus and some of the other art students around the county, creating a color board of panels to showcase our history. In the restoration phase. So we interviewed first. We, got selected. Thank God we did that study. I was on the selection committee for the contractor. I'll never forget Dale coming with his father, interviewing for the job and saying this has to go to a Palm Beach County company that has ties in this community. And we had, Taylor Construction, these national companies bidding on this project, right? Mm-hmm. Executives flying from other parts of the country bidding on the job. And I was looking at the county administrator, and he bends over to me at one point, what do you think? I go, you got to hire Hedrick. You can't hire anybody else. You have to go with a local architect and contractor because we're not going anywhere. This is going to get built right, and we're going to be here no matter what happens with that building. All those other big shots are going to come, they're going to try to build, and then they're going to disappear, and we don't have any problems with the project. So then Hedrick Brothers proceeded with the guidelines. We followed the national guidelines, the restoration documents, the project schedule, and the budget. You talk about a budget. Another thing the county's not used to is doing projects within time and within budget. Dale, Robin, and the crew came in under budget. We gave $400,000. No, not me. You guys gave
less than that.
A little bit less than $400,000 on an $18 million project, and they came in within time too.
That's where the puzzle got weird when the county says, give us a guaranteed maximum price to restore the building. With all the details, and then give us a schedule. So We were successful on both parts, finished it under budget, and finished it on schedule within a week of the original schedule that we issued at the beginning of the project.
That deserves a round of applause in my mind. These are the standards. These are so simple and logical and straightforward. There's actually 10 basic ones, and then there's a big fat book attached to it to tell you what to do and what to not to do. But it's such a challenge today. You know, it's very interesting because I do a lot of preservation work around the state of Florida, and a lot of historic preservation boards are missing the point of preservation. And if you follow the standards and if you follow the work, you can get things done right. And what's interesting, for example, we tried to save the Coconut Grove Playhouse in Miami last week. We did not win that fight. But in the 60s, there was no architects did not practice historic preservation until 1968 when the Preservation Act got done. Very, very good architects, the people that had worked on the Playhouse, didn't know anything about preservation. Everybody was like, we're just going to do our thing. So getting these standards, and they've been improved over the years, have become so important today. And a new, two new generations of architects now have standards and guidelines to follow when they're doing historic preservation work. And we can actually now have a better chance at saving more of our historic buildings because of these standards. There's also do's and don'ts for construction. When we do the walking tour, there's a building where Starbucks is. It's a brick building. And if you ever look at that building, it has the brick on the upper floor, has a little bit of white paint left over. And we tell people, well, because when we did that job, one of the standards is you don't get a sandblaster and blast all the paint off the brick buildings. You gently wash it with soap and water at certain pressures, and if there's a little bit of paint left, then leave a little bit of paint. You know, so these are very good tools for the contractors to use too, and how to apply techniques to restore buildings. These are the floor plans. Again, we took the 27 and modified it to create the 16. The elevations. This is a nice detail because this shows this wave pattern. And again, if you're a detective, you don't have to be an architect, but if you're a detective and you love history, walk around downtown, right, William? You'll see some of these details. The Harvey building has the wave detail. The Como building has a little bit of a wave detail. So my theory is that in that period of time, all of these wonderful workers would look at our location. If you go to Mar-a-Lago, I know I've worked at Mar-a-Lago for 22 years, the columns have parrots and they have monkeys. And so I think it was this idea that you came from up north and you were working in the classical style here, but you wanted to bring some of the, you know, the fauna or the magic of living and working in South Florida, so they would add little details like that. I might be wrong, but I kind of like that idea, and there's a little piece of it.
So here, Rick was telling you about the restoration guidelines. Imagine when we unwrapped it, what you're looking at, that dark line that you see is concrete splashed against the brick from the wraparound building when they poured it. Over on the right side, that brown mark that's inside that tape, that's a welder's burn mark. So we could not use any aggressive, corrosive type cleaners to remove that per the guidelines, but we were able to do it with walnut shells and different things like that that just carefully knocked it off without deteriorating the stone whatsoever. So that was one of our biggest challenges. Just cleaning the building turned out to be one of the biggest challenges because you couldn't just mix up chemicals and go at it.
The other thing too, remember the word character?
Yeah.
So one of the things we do is, okay, what is the historic character of the building? If you look at the columns have nicks and they have cuts. That's character. That's developed over time. You don't want to come in and rip it out and put fresh cement and cover it up. He told you about the mosaic tile. The mosaic tile downstairs has character. It has cracks, and we filled only when we were missing pieces. We had long discussions about how much of the brick was character and how much wasn't.
Yeah, character costs money. And so there were lots of conversations about character.
Architects want a lot of character left.
Right.
The builders, you know, time and money. Dale's checking and making sure, and me and Robin are fighting, talking.
Yeah. But, you know, Palm Beach County and everybody was on track for the same thing. When you restore a building, you restore to where it should be at that time period. and we were very successful doing that.
Yes, and we had a county engineer on the project, John Cheshire, and I like to point him out because when we found that missing piece of stone, the original piece of stone, he said to us, you need to find the best people, and we found traditional cast stone from Toronto, right? And he said, go ahead, just we'll figure out a way to get this done instead of doing it the way they do now, which is, you know, foam, right? Every building you see is foam with stucco. He said, no, let's go ahead and do the original. He said, it would, in fact, he even said it would have been a travesty if we would have done fake stone versus the real stone. It helps when you have someone like him trying to sell the project to the commission. And of course, some of the costs, you know, wind loads, the building was designed and built as a hurricane structure. A fireproof structure. This was right after the big fires in Chicago, Jacksonville, and Baltimore. So all of these new buildings that they were building at the turn of the century were fireproof. And by that, I mean concrete columns, and you've seen it, some of the steel. The brick is just a veneer. So one of the things we had to do was thicken the walls. It's hard to tell at this time of the night, but if you look at the trim work around the window, it's twice as thick it should be, because every window in this building has a column on the left, a column on the right, a beam on the bottom, and a beam on the top of steel, so that the windows could get embedded, and so we could do the hurricane protection. Archie Williams in my office worked very, very closely with Robin developing that detail. The windows on the east side are all brand new windows. This building is famous in Florida for getting hurricane testing and approval of wood windows to meet Hurricane Miami-Dade hurricane codes here in Florida, thanks to the windows on the east side of the building. And then submitting your price. And then here we go.
The hurricanes.
Right? Oh, then if you Google 1916 Palm Beach County Courthouse, there's a 4-minute DVD, which is the 4 years of construction. I think Bert Aronson was responsible. He told me he was responsible for that one time. He said they placed the camera on the courthouse across the street for 4 years, and they showed everything that happened for 4 years really fast in 4 minutes. And one of the things you can see is Hurricane Wilma, remember? So it's really funny because you see all the wind and everything, and the building is there, and the demolition, and the cleaning, and the preparation. But I remember coming here the day after the hurricane. Clematis Street was a mess. This building was missing a few windows. St. Anne's was missing a few windows.
Yeah.
The courthouse, the state attorneys, and the county were a disaster. Like ceilings, windows, I mean, hundreds of windows missing. Do we have pictures of that? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's another picture of the stone and
So
traditional.
those are the blocks that we ordered immediately on approval of the job, because the stone restoration at the exterior was really the critical path of the job.
Yeah.
Having to dissect and restore the exterior, we had to obtain that stone, then it all had to be cut and carved. And so that was our immediate.
1,000, right? About 1,200?
So out of
1,100?
1,100 and some pieces of stone, only 4 had to be cut here on the job to fit in place based on the detailed shop drawings and measurements that were done around the building. We'll never forget, they sent 2 guys down from Toronto, and they'd never been in South Florida summer. And they spent 4 days on a lift measuring this building. It like to kill them. But they did some of the best work, and it was amazing.
And the way the shop drawings are developed, the architects in my office would prepare the base drawings. They would then get shipped up to Canada. They would look at the drawings, they'd prepare their drawings, and they'd come down here, verify, remeasure, double check everything, and then take it back. And to get only 4 pieces to be adjusted out of 1,100 pieces, I think that was a damn good subcontractor. He's the only one I think that we really wanted on this job, was to make sure we had that company working on this project.
Right.
The concrete.
What you're looking at here is some of the long-term corrosion and erosion at the rear columns on this east elevation. As we were doing the unwrapping, we identified early on the building had roof leaks early on in its life, and that's where they connected the 27 and the 55 buildings. And you could see the concrete was totally gone in certain areas with the rebar.
Completely.
So those are some of the surprises. But we had to shore the building from the ground floor to the roof anyway, because we installed the 2 elevators on each side. And so the different steps of doing the restoration were a lot more than what you can imagine.
And we were a little bit nervous of the building collapsing in the middle there because of the elevator pits.
No, you were nervous.
I I was. And so again, just a lot of damage and a lot of repair work before the steel and concrete could be reused. A lot of scaffolding. The interior, this is the courtroom again. Another detail.
There's the concrete wraps that you were talking about, Rick.
Yep. So you see them right there. There's a column from the floor to the ceiling. There's a little beam. There's the upper beam. There's another concrete from the floor to the ceiling. Every one of the historic windows have that. If there's a hurricane, I'm coming here again. Or the Harriet at City Place. These buildings, or St. Anne's, these buildings were really, really well built back then. And with Hedrick's help, we just made them a lot better. Here's the back elevation, the east side of the building. All of it basically to the structure was removed.
Now, Rick, while they're here, you want to talk about the brick on the edges coming around?
So on the east elevation, we couldn't figure out the patterns because we didn't have the drawings until we had a little sliver. It's hard to see. I think there's a picture coming up of the chimney, right? The chimney's going to come in a minute. But if you look at this edge detail, it's about 2 courses of brick. So it's about 24 inches of brick, more or less. That was all that was left. But even not only the horizontal pattern, but the bump outs too. You know, all of that detail that you see on the back elevation, that's how we were able to put it together.
Now, the white that you see on the
Right
left
here.
side, that's plaster that they put on the brick. They just plastered the brick because it became an interior space.
So I had to take all of that off.
So
This is leftover brick from the 27.
Salvage brick.
Stone, too, leftover.
Limestone.
Limestone. It's a huge jigsaw puzzle, right? I mean, it's a lot of fun. The big windows here in the courtroom on the east side of the building.
So that's starting to rebuild the foundation of the
Yep.
porticos.
Here are the porticos, the front door. You can barely see the archway of the front door is right there. The scaffolding going up. More work. I wanted a complete tent around it. I really wanted to hide the building, but the budget right there, we couldn't do that and then surprise everybody when the project was done. That would have been fun. Now you're starting to get the shapes of the pediments, right? The reconstruction, the columns have been reinserted. The waterproofing, why don't you mention that for a moment, Robin? That was really important, how you waterproofed all of these windows.
Well, and then the stone installers were local contractor. The stone was cut and carved out of town, but the local guys installed it, and Dave Smith worked with those guys closely. So imagine on those columns, they dry set all the stone first to make sure it fit just right, and then they would move the stone, then prepare it for the grout, and then put it back into its place.
Double the work.
It was a huge painstaking, but that's the way it had to be done. That's the way it was done back then, and the way it had to get done. And so, can't speak enough about the stonemasons that were on the project.
Great subcontractors. And the bricklayers, too.
So under the restoration, you know, brick buildings, they leak. They have the cavity of the brick, the cavity behind the brick. So when you're restoring a building, you're not going to rip off the new brick. But everywhere that we didn't have original brick that we put finishes in, we waterproofed and built it with modern technologies for waterproofing purposes in that cavity, such as around these 2 windows before the old brick went on. So everywhere we had access, it's protected as if it was built new. So the brick was a wild ride too. So with brick, you have to match the exact brick size to lay brick on an elevation that's already got brick on it. It took us weeks and weeks of searching, but we found a company in Ohio that had the molds of the right size brick to match our brick. So that was one part of the success. And then secondly, just by chance, that vendor made a buff yellow colored brick as well, and was able to make us our replacement brick for the salvage. Now, as we go in and show you the pictures, the way that they dried brick in 1916, it was kiln dried with fire and coal, which created a lot of smoke. Nowadays, they use natural gas and things like that. So if you walked around the building and you look at the east elevation, which is the new brick, you'll see nice, even, buff colored brick. But as you get around the other 3 elevations, you're going to see brick that's got a range of like 10 different shades over the buff color, and that's because of the way they kiln dried it originally in 1916. And so the rear elevation tells the story where the restoration kind of stops and starts because of what they did to the east elevation.
And that's part of that theory of setting it up for future generations, right? So that our grandkids might become architects. They can come here, they can see the building turn the corner, and they can see the complete change in one solid color versus the 10 colors of the brick, and that shows a nice contrast of the building. Here's another view of the front. There's that whole back that we were just talking about, and there are the patterns of the brick that we were able to mimic. And then the return corners, you know, all of our buildings downtown have a return. Very smart way of building. They wouldn't spend all their monies on all 4 facades. They would spend the money on the primary exterior facades of the streets. Alleys were made for service and deliveries. Think of your wonderful neighborhood CVS today. What does it look like? 4 elevations of blandness and just nothing really good because they spend all the money on all the sides instead of focusing on the front of the building.
So if you look closely on the left side where we showed you they plastered that brick on that corner.
You look hard.
If you look real close, you can see about 3 feet of a a little bit dark shaded
Right
brick
there.
standing vertical, and then all the brick across is that nice even color. That's the difference in the brick areas.
The side elevations or secondary elevations of the building. The sketches, I'm very fortunate. My dad is my partner, and he's retired now, 82, but he is a great artist. So we had some small pictures of the 50s of the eagle, and he drew that into a small sketch, 11 by 17, and then we did the technical sketches, and then we worked with the folks up in Toronto to do the clay maquettes, and then Robin and I went up to Toronto in the wintertime to sign off on the maquettes, and then we came back again when they had the actual stone pieces cut before they delivered all the pieces here to Palm Beach County. There's the eagle too. This is a beautiful piece of work. I like to say on the walking tours, you can't, now everybody knows where the joints are because now you're seeing this picture, right? So I used to say you can't see the joints of the bird, but now this is how well they built this thing.
So the plaster molding is to the right.
Yeah.
The piece on the left is the stone they're carving it out of.
Exactly. Old school.
Yeah. Now, I will say, when you walk out the front door and leave tonight, go downstairs, turn back, and look at the eagle. That is the most intimidating looking bird that you will see anywhere, and he belongs on a courthouse.
And the other thing, too, the spelling of the word courthouse, there was a lot of discussion. Should we use the modern one word or the 2 words? And we ended up, I think,
yeah, we
rightfully-
argued.
We still
and
argue
fought
about that. I like courthouse. There's that beautiful plaster now up in the mezzanine level, restored. The stairs were really a great story. You see the pattern of the mosaic. And again, part of the detective work is, all right, where else in Florida can we go to see if there's anything like this that was built? What do we find out? There's a courthouse in Jacksonville. There's another one even better in a little town called Arcadia, DeSoto County. It's about a 3-hour drive west of here. Built in 1913 by the same architect. Time for a road trip. We go over there, and guess what? They're still using that courthouse today. Is still a courthouse. The judge was having session, and we're walking around, looking around, taking pictures. The light fixtures, the stair, the newel posts, the railing. I mean, there's so many little details of this building. I mean, neoclassical design. The only thing different that I saw over there that we don't have here is that they have little scrolls underneath the beams in the other court in the hallway that we don't have here. But other than that, even the flooring was almost identical. That helped us create the newel posts and the railing. The only modern thing we had to do to that newel post, and we had to do something very similar to Harriet, was a grab bar for safety, for life safety. So the only thing that we added, so we changed the color and the material, it's black, is the handrail that you see here for life safety, and the other one on the wall. Other than that, it's a complete replica of the original staircase. Here it is, going down. Yes? That's yes, concrete with concrete base with a marble finish.
Right, but the staircases weren't there. The photographs show concrete that we actually poured to put the staircases back. And the mosaic floor showed us where to put that back. The actual staircase holes themselves were filled in at floors and became part of rooms throughout the building when they removed the staircases completely. So this photograph is a loss that I was very disappointed with the fire marshal at the time. But if you go look at the older courthouses and you walk up the main staircase inside, you're in that main lobby area, and you look to the left and right, you see those beautiful grand staircases that take you upstairs. And so
Not here.
the original 1916 building had the open staircases like you would think. But if you walked in the stairs or you came up, you went through a pair of glass doors and a wall coming off that staircase into that hallway. So as we were going forward with the design of the project, the local municipalities have the ability to enforce the different codes and safety measures in ADA to make the building safe. So Rick submitted his drawings. They marked it up. They wanted to put walls and close those staircases off. And I'm like, there's no way. That just totally changes the interior. So we set up a meeting, and I went and argued with them and told them we can give you a wet wall where if there was a fire,
we had fire sprinklers, so we were able to flush
yeah, we
water.
added fire system, and if there was a fire, we could have created a wet wall. And I argued till I was blue in the face. I made him mad, but it's like, you know, how can you do that? But this is one of the little losses. But for the safety of people coming out of this courtroom and going downstairs, they need to enforce. So that wall and those doors are not original, and they're planted there to separate the staircase for people exiting the building in a fire.
So we left some detective work for our grandchildren. And some of you know the answer already, but what's wrong with that picture right where I'm pointing? The mosaic, the pattern continues, right? It doesn't turn the corner, right, and frame the room, right? That's because that's the original pattern, and I wanted to make sure when people come in the future, they'll look at that wall and those doors and they'll say, that's not original. And so at least we left a little mark there, you know, working with Robin and making sure that we could leave the mosaic the way it was. There's a beautiful rooms. Now, lighting is another thing that's changed. Lighting is now twice as much. So the original design had a light fixture every other bay. We have every bay to make sure that we meet the lighting codes. Everything is new, electrical, the plumbing, the air conditioning.
The
ADA,
basement, in 1916, the basement was never built out. It was just a raw concrete storage space. So that's why you see the basement all finished out.
It's hard to see from this picture, but we had vault doors that we left in place. They were just decorative doors, so they're there as part of the original design. There's the courtroom. Again, these Polaroid pictures were instrumental. There was a ceremony of Boy Scouts here with a judge in the 50s, and with that picture, we were able to recreate the architecture of the interiors of the court space and the judge's area over here in the court area. There's the original, and there's that little detail that I told you that we added to play off of the to get the ADA accessibility.
So when we found the locks. When we found the original locks, we salvaged them, and a lot of them needed work. So working with the different vendors that we work here, we found that in New England, the Accurate Lock Company was the original company that made this hardware originally. Still doing business. We were able to send the hardware up there, get it restored, and they assisted us with adding these levers and actually restoring these old door closures that you see here. They actually refurbished them and restored them so that we can put them back in the building.
What they say to you when you sent them back up there? Say, hey, when we're restoring this thing 8 years later, what they
Remember what they said to us? That they also wanted to work on the project. Remember what did they say to you when you sent the equipment back to them to fix it?
Where did they come from? I'm just asking a lot of questions. Oh, yeah.
Oh, funny contractor. That's right. And actually, what I loved about companies from out of town, from Canada, from Indiana, they were just as excited as we were to get the chance, right, Dale, to work on this project with the local people here in town. So there's what it looked like. There it is today. The doors, these doors did not exist, but we had photography, and Archie and my dad did some wonderful drawings to recreate the doors the way they are today. This is just a view this is what we had the view before. This is the view now. If you stand outside the center of this building, you can actually see it right now. You can see the archway of the 1985 courthouse, it is centered over here. It's not where it belongs, which is 21 feet over here. And the reason for that is if you go over there, if you've ever been jury duty, there's a model of this whole complex, the state attorney, the courthouse, the garage, the county office building, and a big park with a big circle, blue circle, I guess it was a fountain, right? They measured from the sidewalk to the garage, from the sidewalk to the county office building, drew an X and dropped the fountain. Well, the center line of that situation was over here instead of where it belonged, right? Over here. So we were able to stop that fountain, and instead we have this building here.
That much.
I've spent 17 years trying to get them, where is it, to move that building 21 feet. Judge, can't you help me out here? Joel, you got to be able to help me with that, no? Still. Jeremy? No. Okay, so there it is. Again, after the selective demolition, early start to the construction, there's an aerial view from the courthouse, looking at the courthouse. There's another side view. It's beautiful. When I do the walking tour, I love doing the walking tours because you'll see people from out of state. They just come here and I go, "What's so nice about our courthouse that you don't have up north?" And they look at me like, "What are you talking about?" I go, "The landscaping. We have coconut trees and we have nice landscaping in South Florida." It's a perfect postcard. There it is, right fresh, 8 years ago. And challenges, the budget, the mechanical systems were huge challenges. All the research to get the windows, the impact windows, and now part of the state standards. Moving plumbing walls around, creating everything, the tightness of the building so it wouldn't leak. And then we worked with a national museum designer. They came in, they worked with the board of the Historical Society, and having Richard and Pat Johnson donate the money that they did to make sure we could finish this building. Very similar to the Harriet at City Place. We had enough money to do the outside, and then we had Harriet come up and she donated money to finish the Harriet. So it was great that both of these great projects had significant donors to help bring back the interiors of these buildings too. And there's the grand opening. And there's my son. So thank you very much. I think that's it, right? Thank you.
You want to take questions?
Sorry we took so long. Yeah, some questions?
Yeah.
Questions? Oh, step outside with me over here. Right outside this door, right? There's another floor pattern change. Just a little square, like 4x4, 4x5, something like that. And that's where the wall was, right before they would bring
And
your favorite people here for court, right?
it was making me and my team crazy to figure out why that hallway, the pattern on the floor just ran like everywhere else, and then that pattern just jumped over. And there was some kind of room in the middle of the hallway. We couldn't figure it out. And so going back and talking to different people and figured out that's where a small room where
Little cubby.
where the what do you call them if they're not guilty but
right.
they might be guilty?
Holding cell?
Yeah. It's kind of like architects,
That's right.
Yeah.
So we were able to do that too. And we kept on the second floor with the walkway from the 27, the same type of flooring was there. It's a T shape, so you can actually walk into the exhibit room downstairs and you see the original 27 tile matching. Even the tile pattern of the mosaic was different in the 27 than the 16. We just architects and interior designers, right? We just love to make things, challenging for contractors.
Oh. Okay, so with the challenge of doing historic restoration, a lot of the craftsmen that we use, they've got their levels and string lines. Everything is perfect. We aggressive on all of our buildings. Typically, we aggressive, perfect, plumb, straight, true. You come to a historic building, you've got to do it the way they did it in 1916, whether it's right or wrong. So The brick, the brick on this corner is 1.5 inches lower than it is on that corner across the whole building. So throw out the levels. The levels aren't going to work for doing the brick. And then the wainscot marble panels that the beautiful that you see in the hallways. Well, when we put the hallway back, we followed the mosaic floor because that told us where the marble base went, which told us where the plaster wall went, that went up and matched the molding, the existing molding up high. So if the molding was there and the floor was there and we had to build a wall, if it wasn't plumb, we had to build it out of plumb anyway. And then I have my stonemason come in and he's bringing his level and wants to stick the marble in level. Dude, you can't put it in level. You've got to put it in out of level. Just follow the wall. So there were some very fun arguments and almost fights, different things. People are very passionate about what they do.
Yes.
And you find out when you tell them to do it differently. And so.
Yes. Okay. For the bookend, you mean the stonework? Yes, on the east side. Yes. Well, because they are classical. They're not made up like most of the architecture today. So they go back thousands of years. And so you follow standards and models. Yes. That's why they're so pleasing, exactly. And in terms of the roadshow, we don't have that, but we have through a generous donor a film. I'm not sure if you want to announce that or not, but there is a documentary. And
One of our legacy projects to celebrate and commemorate the 100th anniversary of this building is we at the Historical Society are producing a 52-minute PBS quality documentary on the history of the development of Palm Beach County through the lens of its historic courthouse. So if you all come out on Tuesday the 25th, we're going to have a trailer to just pique your curiosity about the documentary. It's in production right now. We've got some amazing celebrities from our community that are going to be participating, and it's going to be an absolutely fantastic project. But stay tuned for it. We're not quite ready to launch it and announce, Rick, but thank you for bringing that up. It's our legacy project for this year.
And the producer told me she thinks it's of national quality. She thinks she can sell it to other markets around the country. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I was just curious as to the philosophy behind the architecture of the wraparound ability so much.
Great question. Where are the politicians here? Are they retired politicians? So I'm safe, right? Plus, he's my friend. So, so back then, it was very easy. We always take the easy road in life, right? To just go and do an addition wraparound because you didn't have to go to the voters. If they actually kicked it around. There were actually some drawings done in the 60s of some really scary looking buildings for a new courthouse, either on this side or across the street. So the easiest, most convenient, quickest way to get this project done was to basically strip everything down, chop the porticos, and do the additions that were there. And Judge Mounts, you know, wonderful friend and one of the key people instrumental to saving this building, told me a story that the local judges, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, were so upset at the time that they were going to, or they decided to take a lawsuit against Palm Beach County and Broward County, or I mean, that was how upset people were. That people were very, very upset about that, but they had no way to stop it because they were following county procurement, you know, regulations of an addition versus, although the addition turned out to be several times larger than this building, you know. So, but I understand that a lot of people, lawyers, judges, a lot of people, local people, were very, very upset with that design. And it was at a period of design in architecture that's not very well liked in this country, the brutalist movement, or this whole movement of throw everything out, you know, with the kitchen sink and make something up, you know. And so I think it's a great tool. I've heard from people in Tallahassee that it's after the state capitol restoration in the state building. And if you look at it from across the street, it has similarities with the county court office building and this building. It's the second most important historic structure from a civic point of view because of the change in the building and bringing the building back. But that's what they did. It was all about conveniency and expediting a project. Yes, Joe.
Can you hear me? This is a funny room with the acoustics in here, but I'll try to speak up. And I remember when I came back over, this room was gutted, and I talked to Robin, and I talked to you, and had several conversations with Robin, and I remember thinking at the time how lucky we were that we had you two guys and Dale to do this work, because it was obvious, and it is obvious now, that it was much more than another job, and that your hearts were in it. And I just somebody needs to say what a great job you did, and how indebted a lot of us are to you.
Thank you, Mayor.
There
And
was a young lady over here with a question
yes.
earlier.
Good question. We have pictures too of them, and they're very close to the original. We rejected 3 shop drawings from the awning.
We argued about awnings too.
Yes. And maybe the ladies will understand this better than the men, but you know, stitching and making dresses, right? So today, if you look at an awning, it's all one color, and then they'll slap a different, if you wanted multiple colors, they'll just slap the other color on top of it. I wanted them made the real way, you know, green, white, you know, and so we had that little argument to the point where I finally said to him, go to Tallahassee, look at the awnings on the state capitol, those are white and red, and match that. And so we got the shop drawings, right? I think that happened after that. So the awnings are the true way of, you know, of making an awning, which is a two-color awning.
Well, I think with that, let's give one more round of applause to Rick and Robin.
Great job, Rick.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to invite you all to stick around. I think Rick and Robin may stick around as well, have a glass of wine, a glass of Prosecco, and a little nosh. But thank you all again for coming out tonight. I also want to thank and acknowledge our friends at Creative Anger. Creative Anger has helped us a little bit with our acoustics. How was the sound tonight? A little better, everybody? Okay, fantastic. Thank you to our friends at Creative Anger. They've been videotaping all this, so we'll have some of this on our website. Thank you again, everyone, for being here.